They said miracles don't happen in shelters, but when the giant cat was left to die, heaven itself seemed to intervene. And within hours, the unthinkable unfolded before everyone's eyes. The day began not with a whisper, but with the silent cry of a creature carrying a story too heavy for its own heart. At the Humane Society of Carroll County in Westminster, Maryland, the doors had just swung open, and the air inside carried its usual rhythm. Paperwork shuffling, phones ringing, the subtle hum of another morning at the shelter. But destiny had something else planned. A man appeared at the entrance, his hands struggling under the immense weight of what seemed, at first glance, like a living mountain of fur. The orange and white giant he carried was unlike any cat the receptionist had ever seen. The animal's size defied belief, as though nature itself had poured too much love and strength into a single creature. Yet in the man's grip, there was no warmth, no tenderness. His face told a story of discomfort, as though holding this being was more burden than bond. When he opened his mouth to speak, his words painted the cat in shadows. Aggressive, troublesome, dangerous around small children. But the receptionist, seasoned by years of witnessing the untold truth behind surrendered animals, felt something stir deep in her chest. Something wasn't right. She had seen deceit before, the kind born not from malice, but from misunderstanding. From people who never learned how to listen to the silent language of animals. And as she looked at the enormous feline with wide amber eyes that glistened like autumn leaves, she wondered, had this cat been abandoned not because of who he was, but because no one ever tried to understand him? The man gave the name, Edgar, but the way he placed Edgar on the floor, without even a parting touch, revealed everything. He didn't just surrender Edgar, he discarded him. The righteous care for the needs of their animals, but the kindest acts of the wicked are cruel. And in that moment, the air in the shelter grew heavy, as though even heaven itself mourned a bond broken too soon. Yet what came next would prove that Edgar's story was not one of endings, but of miracles waiting to unfold. Edgar, the giant Maine Coon, now stood on unfamiliar ground, his massive paws pressing into the cool tiles of the shelter. Though his body towered like a lion's, his spirit seemed small, almost trembling, as if he feared the world had no place left for him. The receptionist bent down slowly, cautious, not wanting to startle him. But instead of the aggression his owner had claimed, what erupted from Edgar was a sound that melted every heart in the room. A deep, rumbling purr. It vibrated like a hymn, a declaration of trust offered freely to a stranger who dared to kneel close enough to hear it. This wasn't the portrait of a dangerous beast. This was a gentle giant who had been misunderstood, mislabeled, and cast aside by the very humans meant to love him. The shelter staff gathered, their eyes widening as Edgar brushed against their hands, leaning into their touch like a soul starved for kindness. And in that moment, the truth became undeniable. Edgar wasn't broken. He wasn't aggressive. He was love wrapped in fur, waiting desperately for someone to see it. But the truth of Edgar's past still hung in the air, aching. At his former home, the small grandchildren had screamed at his approach, terrified not of cruelty, but of his sheer size. Confused and hurt, Edgar had chased after them, trying to understand why their laughter had turned into fear. What the family saw as hostility was really heartbreak. A cycle of misunderstanding that ended with him being abandoned. He wasn't a monster. He was a soul too big for a world that refused to slow down and listen. The wolf shall live with the lamb, the leopard shall lie down with the goat, and a little child shall lead them. Edgar's story whispered of a world where animals and children could walk side by side without fear, where love was bigger than misunderstanding. And now, inside the shelter, hope flickered once again, as though fate had brought him here not to be forgotten, but to finally be seen. It didn't take long for Edgar to stir something powerful within the shelter. His very presence commanded awe. Weighing in at 21 pounds, towering in both size and spirit, Edgar wasn't just a cat. He was a wonder. The executive director, Charles Brown, later admitted the staff had never seen anything like him before. His thick, fluffy coat shimmered under the fluorescent lights, every strand telling the story of a Maine Coon's legacy. Strength, resilience, and love. 9 years old, yet still radiant with life, Edgar embodied everything extraordinary about his breed, and as the workers busied themselves preparing his intake paperwork, it became clear that Edgar's arrival was more than just another animal entering the system. He was an event. "He's enormous," one volunteer whispered. "But look at him. He's a teddy bear." Indeed, the way Edgar rolled onto his back, exposing his vast belly for rubs, sent waves of laughter and warmth through the shelter. It was as though he wanted to prove, without words, that he had nothing but love to give. And yet, beneath the joy, the staff felt an unshakable responsibility. They couldn't allow this gentle soul to languish in a cage. Misunderstood again. He needed a home, one that could match the size of his spirit. And so, the Humane Society did what modern miracles demanded. They turned to the digital world. Cameras clicked as Edgar posed, sometimes regal, sometimes comical, always captivating. His story, paired with his massive frame, was destined to travel far. And when they launched his campaign on social media, the reaction was electric. Within minutes, Edgar's face was everywhere, shared, reshared, and celebrated by millions. 2 million people saw him within hours, his gentle eyes reaching hearts across the nation. He became not just a rescue, but a phenomenon. And in the process, something even greater happened. People weren't only asking about Edgar. They were flocking to the shelter, inspired to adopt other animals who also longed for homes. Edgar's story had become a beacon, calling humans back to their deepest bond with nature. The bond of compassion. Ask the animals, and they will teach you. Or the birds in the sky, and they will tell you. Edgar had become a teacher, a healer, a reminder that sometimes the biggest hearts come in the most unexpected forms. The story that began with rejection ended in redemption. Edgar didn't wait long for his miracle family. Among the thousands of people touched by his story online, one household stepped forward. A home where patience, love, and gentleness weren't just words, but a way of life. When they arrived at the shelter, Edgar approached them without hesitation, his massive frame leaning into their embrace as if he already knew he belonged. The new family saw not a problem, but a blessing. They saw not a burden, but a gift. And when Edgar finally left the shelter, nestled in the arms of people who truly understood him, there wasn't a dry eye among the staff who had cared for him. They had witnessed the transformation of a soul once discarded into one now celebrated. But Edgar's miracle rippled beyond his own adoption. That very day, families inspired by his viral story adopted dozens of other animals waiting for love. Edgar, the giant cat once misunderstood, had become a bridge between humans and the forgotten creatures of the shelter. He had changed lives not only with his size, but with his heart. And so, the tale of Edgar ended not with sorrow, but with triumph. For he proved that no animal is too big to love, and no story too broken to be healed. The Lord is good to all. He has compassion on all he has made. Edgar was proof of that compassion, living and breathing. His story was not just an emotional true story, not just another viral YouTube rescue, but a touching animal story that reminded the world, when humanity listens to the cry of nature, miracles are born. The shelter believed Edgar's story would draw attention, but no one could have predicted the tidal wave that followed. On the quiet afternoon of November 29th, 2016, at exactly 3 p.m., once his photo went live on Facebook. A single frame of a massive orange and white Maine Coon with soulful eyes that seemed to whisper, "Will you love me?" Within minutes, hearts across the country were set ablaze, shares multiplied, comments poured in, and the post spread like wildfire until it reached over 2 million people in just hours. The shelter staff watched in awe as Edgar's gentle gaze captured the world. But destiny was weaving its own thread, pulling one woman's scrolling thumb to stop mid-swipe. Jenna, lounging casually with no plan other than wasting a few minutes on Facebook, suddenly froze. Her eyes widened. Her heart thudded. On her screen was the cat of a lifetime. "I first saw his photo circling around Facebook that Tuesday," she would later recall, her voice trembling with the memory. "I was in awe. I'd never seen a cat like him before. So enormous, yet so beautiful." Jenna had grown up surrounded by cats, But none had ever struck her soul this way. Something in Edgar's eyes, a mixture of strength, sorrow, and longing, reached past the glass of her phone and touched her heart. This isn't just a cat, she thought. This is a story waiting for me. And without hesitation, she messaged her boyfriend Rich. We need him. We need this cat. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. For Jenna, her treasure wasn't gold, but the chance to rescue a soul who had been misunderstood, to answer the silent cry of a gentle giant. The urgency was overwhelming. Jenna knew Edgar's photo had already reached millions, and her mind raced with the fear that she might be too late. What if someone else had already claimed him? What if her heart had found its match only to lose him before they ever met? Rich, seeing her passion and urgency, agreed immediately. They rushed to the Humane Society, their car weaving through traffic as Jenna clutched her phone, refreshing the post again and again, watching the comments multiply by the hundreds. When they pulled into the parking lot, their fears seemed confirmed. Cars filled every space, families streamed through the doors, and the air buzzed with one name: Edgar. Inside, the receptionist met them with a soft, apologetic smile. If you hear about Edgar, she began. Jenna's chest tightened. Too late. But then came the words that changed everything. You'll need to wait in line. He hasn't chosen anyone yet. Hope surged like lightning through Jenna's veins. Yet, the waiting was excruciating. One by one, families entered the meeting room with Edgar. Some came out overwhelmed. Too big. Too much to handle. Others whispered excitedly about adoption paperwork. Jenna's heart pounded with every opening door. What if he doesn't like us? What if someone else takes him first? She whispered to Rich, her voice breaking. And then, after what felt like an eternity, her name was called. She stepped into the room, her palms damp, her breath shallow. Edgar lay stretched out, regal yet weary, his amber eyes dulled by the endless parade of strangers. This was it, the moment that would decide everything. But ask the animals and they will teach you. Jenna extended her trembling hand. Edgar lifted his head, looked directly into her soul, and with a single soft meow pressed his massive face against her palm. In that instant, heaven seemed to sigh. The bond was forged. What happened next was pure magic. The gentle giant purred so loudly the room seemed to vibrate. He rolled onto his side, exposing his massive belly, and as Jenna scratched behind his ears, Edgar melted into bliss. When she paused, he nudged her hand insistently, demanding more love. He has the coolest personality. Jenna laughed through tears. He's affectionate, so laid back. He's such a character. But the real test wasn't whether Jenna loved Edgar. It was whether Edgar would love Jenna back. And as though reading her soul, Edgar stood, lumbered across the room, and pressed his entire enormous body against her legs, purring with thunderous joy. The staff exchanged knowing glances. I think he's made his choice, one whispered. And indeed, he had. The adoption papers were signed that very day, only 3 hours after Edgar had been abandoned at the shelter. His destiny had shifted forever. Jenna and Rich carried him out the doors, their hearts swelling, the crowd parting as though watching a king reclaim his throne. And as the autumn sun sank low, Edgar rode to his new home, not as a discarded misfit, but as a miracle of love rediscovered. The Lord is good to all. He has compassion on all he has made. But Edgar's journey didn't end at the shelter door. At home, the introductions began. Loki, Jenna's playful cat, and Thor, her tiny chihuahua, approached curiously, then froze in awe. Compared to Edgar's massive frame, Loki looked like a kitten and Thor seemed almost comically small. At first, they backed away, uncertain, but Jenna, patient and wise, introduced them slowly. Edgar explored his new castle, sniffing every corner, patting through every room, until he finally stretched out for a well-deserved nap. 30 minutes later, he awoke transformed, calm, content, as though realizing he was safe at last. Day by day, trust bloomed. Loki, the braver of the two, was first to play. Soon Thor joined, discovering that Edgar wasn't a threat, but a friend. To Jenna's amazement, the trio became inseparable, sunbathing together, curling up in heaps of fur, living proof that love dissolves all fear. Edgar thrived, his spirit unburdened, his heart wide open. Jenna would often lift him in her arms laughing, "You're such a big baby." And Edgar, once abandoned for being misunderstood, now soaked in endless affection. "He gets along great with our other dog and cat," Jenna reported with joy. "It's like he's always been here." The description his former family had given seemed like a cruel misunderstanding, the frightened screams of children misread as Edgar's fault. But here, in the arms of love, Edgar's true nature shone. A gentle giant, affectionate, loyal, and endlessly tender. His past was behind him. His miracle was now. "Whoever is kind to the least of these shows kindness to me." Months passed, and Edgar's story became legend. Not just a viral post, not just a shelter success, but a beacon of hope for misunderstood animals everywhere. He had not only found a home, but also inspired countless adoptions. Proof that one photo, one story, one act of compassion can ripple across the world. Jenna often reflected on the chance scroll that changed her life. "I'll always be thankful I stopped when I did," she said softly. "He was waiting for me, and I was waiting for him." And so, Edgar lived not as a cast-off, but as a cherished member of a family that adored him. A dog, a cat, and a giant Maine Coon. An unlikely trio bound together by love. His story was more than a rescue. It was a reminder that animals are not problems to be discarded, but souls longing for connection. And sometimes, when humanity listens to that longing, miracles unfold. "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life." And for Edgar, the gentle giant, goodness and mercy had finally found him. And so, the giant cat who was once abandoned, forgotten, and left to fade away, finally found not just a shelter, but a home. His story reminds us that miracles aren't loud, they whisper, in every heartbeat that dares to hope again, in every tear that falls when love returns. What began as a tragedy became a testimony of life's most fragile truth, that no soul is ever too broken to be loved again. And as the giant cat curled into the arms of those who chose him, the world realized, sometimes the greatest rescue is not of the animal, but of our own humanity.